sí, vamos a avanzar ya con la parte final de la sesión, y para ello vamos a dar paso a Walter Greenleaf de la Universidad de Standford. Walter, thank you so much for joining us as well. We are pretty excited about it. So now, Walter, tell us about your vision about digital health tech trends to watch in the near future, or how can we keep up with digital transformation in healthcare? A lot of topics to be covered by all of us. So, Walter, now the stage is yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and very, very pleased to have an opportunity to talk about some of the emerging trends in digital health technology. I'll start by sharing my screen and give a bit of an overview presentation. My center of gravity in terms of my academic work is with the Stanford Health Center and the Stanford University Virtual Human Interaction Lab. I also work at the National Mental Health Innovation Center at the University of Colorado. These are my academic affiliations. I also work with a number of, and this is important for me to mention, a number of digital health startups. That's an extension of my enthusiasm for this arena. I'm empowered by my concern about the looming healthcare crisis. We're certainly in the middle of a healthcare crisis now with the current pandemic, but all we have to do is do the math, and we know that there is another healthcare crisis on the way with an aging population. In the US, our population's doubled just over the last 40 years, and it's even more true, these emerging demographics is a problem for healthcare in other countries. The only way to address this emerging problem is to leverage technology. Fortunately, digital therapeutics are emerging pretty rapidly and will make a profound difference. In the short time that I have, I will try and cover an overview of the digital health revolution, mention some of the emerging and confluent technologies that are empowering this search forward. I'll talk a bit about precision medicine and the paradigm that's emerging with it and the importance that it has for what we're doing. I'll give an overview of where digital therapeutic technologies are currently being used. I'll talk a little bit, very briefly, about the neuroscience of why these emerging technologies have such impact. And then I'll summarize by talking about some of the constraints and challenges. So I'll move it along at a pretty brisk clip to cover all those topic areas. I'm focusing on technology in this talk, but of course, the technology is emerging in the context of shifts in the business model for digital healthcare. One of the exciting and interesting emergence is the merging of the tech titans, Apple and Google and others, into the digital health landscape. Also, the emergence of some of the larger consumer supply chains, such as Amazon and Walmart, moving into the healthcare arena. There's also been a pretty amazing shift in the regulatory landscape with some of the barriers dropping, largely empowered by the response to the COVID pandemic. Telemedicine is gaining traction, as has been talked about earlier, and that's also allowing digital healthcare to take a prominent role. And there's a shift in the business model with a focus now on mental health. Finally having a better understanding and better tools to address the mental health landscape. So those are some of the shifts in business arena of digital health that are empowering the acceptance of some of the technology trends, which will be the subject of the rest of my talk. As everybody who is listening knows, we're in the middle of a digital health revolution, with the patient being the center of care. Shifting away from the clinic or the hospital, those are still very important centers of care, but the patient is becoming the center. We're leveraging wearable sensors, machine learning algorithms, mobile health and e-health technology, and we're leveraging the connectivity that's afforded by the internet, allowing us to leverage social and collaborative interactions to support healthcare. And it's really the full stack of healthcare that is being dramatically affected by the emergence of digital health technology, prevention and wellness, much more robust objective assessments of physical and cognitive function, much more functional training of our clinicians and support staff, improved interventions, new methods to facilitate adherence. It's not easy to do healthcare as a patient. And one of the powerful tools that digital health technology is bringing is a new way to facilitate adherence to the arduous pathway of being a patient. And we're also leveraging digital health technology, of course, to allow us to reach underserved populations. In the last 10 years, almost every medical device has moved from an analog, handwritten record world to a digital world. It's really quite exciting to see how much a transformation has occurred in a very short amount of time. We're also entering the era of medical wearables, where people are wearing technology that is helping them collect healthcare information and the clinical community. Also, next generation technology that can be implanted with sensors to record physiological states or provide a therapeutic intervention. We have wearables, we have hearables, we have systems that are able to track, do a complete sleep hypnogram just by wearing a device, basically a portable sleep lab. Watches and rings that we can wear that collect our physiological signals and send it up to the cloud for analysis. And these digital systems are not just measuring the physical parameters of our health. We're also collecting biomarkers that reflect our cognitive and emotional status. We can come up with brain health biomarkers by studying the passive data that can be collected from our smartphones. Voice analytics is emerging as a biomarker for anxiety and depression and pain. We can capture facial expressions and use that also as an indication of cognitive response to a stimulus or as a marker of emotional state. And we're also starting to use augmented reality technology and the micro movements involved in using a device as an indicator of cognitive function. So it's really amazing the new ways we're able to index cognitive and mood state. This, of course, allows us to aggregate data ideally and importantly as in a anonymized way where patient privacy is protected. But we can come up with at one end of this amazing system, patient-facing applications that leverage mobile technology, virtual reality technology, tablets and computer screens to provide assessments, reminders, provide information and motivational connectivity. At the other end, we can also have clinicians and healthcare administrators and research scientists looking at aggregated data to look for trends and to evolve new clinical paradigms, new formularies to help improve and ideally provide a precision medicine approach to interventions. We're seeing the emergence of what are called prescription digital therapeutics, where there's combination therapy of a medication may be combined with a digital health app to come up with something with combined incremental efficacy by, for example, combining cognitive behavioral therapy with medication. These prescription digital therapeutics create areas in sections where there's high clinical needs, particularly some of the needs that are emerging to address problems in CNS and mental health care. These software-based therapies can be even more effective when they're used in combination. We can use the ability to monitor and track progress to do dose optimization of both the digital therapeutic and the prescription medicine. We can address comorbid conditions by providing medication that works hand in hand with a therapeutic intervention. We can facilitate adherence by leveraging the power of some of the skills and tools that we've learned from our friends in the gaming community of how to promote adherence and motivate people to adhere to a difficult regime. And we can collect data because we're combining a digital health app with a prescription medicine. We can collect data about utilization. This this use of digital therapeutics creates value throughout all sections of the healthcare stack. We can standardize data collection for clinical trials. We can collect real-world data supporting regulatory submissions. We can enhance clinical touch points by allowing the clinicians to see patients when they're not necessarily in the clinic. We can have incremental efficiency and real-world data support the business model behind medicine. So really the full stack of the healthcare chain, starting with drug discovery and development, all the way down to patient utilization and economic analysis. And it's really every participant in the healthcare system has some benefit from the application of digital health technology. For patients, it can be more convenient, they get better results, and it can provide immediate care by leveraging the power of telemedicine. For clinicians, there's better data-driven care based on evidence. We can get better patient engagement, fewer dropouts and no-shows, and the technology allows us to facilitate follow-up post-discharge. And for the economic value, we can measure the validity and quality of care dynamically, come up with more precision medicine approach, and hence reduce the overall healthcare cost. So let me discuss very briefly some of the emerging and complementary technologies that are supporting this surge forward of digital healthcare applications. Of course, 5G is allowing us to have better connectivity and more robust interactions using edge computing. We can stream and collect information in much denser density. Machine learning, of course, allows us to look at large amounts of data and understand trends and do predictive modeling. The other confluent technology that's emerging is the digital twin paradigm. Migrating over from managing complex industrial processes and machinery, we're now applying that to individuals, taking genetic information, sensor-driven data, biological information, healthcare records and history, up with models so that we don't have to take a one-size-fits-all approach, that we can apply therapeutic protocols to an individual based on their specific situation, their health history, and model out to do predictive modeling as to what the best choices they have. And most importantly, be able to provide options to a patient, choices that they can make about their therapeutic pathway based on their preferences. So preference might be to optimize longevity, it might be to optimize functionality, it might be a particular skill they want to preserve. So with precision healthcare, we're able to provide better choices to patients as they go down their healthcare journey. The other thing that's empowering the digital health revolution is, of course, the emergence of much more sophisticated sensors. The Internet of Things allows us to do better passive data collection and aggregation of data in a very robust way. We're starting to see the emergence of lab-on-a-chip technology that allows us to collect information about hormone levels, other biomarkers, proteins, ions from the surface of the skin, and move what normally would have to be done in a clinical lab out to the point of care. And the expression that's starting to emerge is the point of care is everywhere. Instead of having a centralized lab, or and this has partially been fueled by the emergence of COVID, we're now starting to see clinical lab technology migrating to the home. There'll soon be a home health hub where you can put a cartridge in to test on the spot for sexually transmitted diseases, urinary tract infections, biomarkers of chronic disease status and inflammatory disease, along with being able to scan, again, where the individual is instead of having to send information to the clinical lab and have it come back. We'll soon have technology that allows us to do diagnostics and digital therapeutics wherever the individual is. There's also been a shift in our culture. We're starting now to have an always-on culture, for better or worse. We're getting used to the idea that we are never offline, that the information is around us, and as we do better jobs of connecting people in underserved populations, this will allow us to both push and pull information in ways to improve healthcare. We're also getting better at having new ways of capturing information about an individual and adjusting our technology to monitor. In the future, our smart cars will be sensitive to our mood state, for example. And we can track gaze, voice tone, body position, all this is a way of improving our technology so it responds in a more personal manner to our situation, our mood states, and our needs. In the field of virtual reality and augmented reality technology, which is an area that I specialize in, we're starting to get better with having our graphics, to have multi-user participants in a shared virtual world for patient support or post-discharge follow-up or for training. And the avatars are now, instead of looking robotic, are starting to have better facial expressions, very voice tones, better nonverbal communication. So technology is emerging, and it's these confluent technologies that will help power the next generation of technology. My field, and I've been excited to see the recent changes. I've been involved in the field of VR and AR technology now for more than 30 years, and it's incredible to see that we can get a really robust virtual reality system for a third of the cost of an expensive smartphone. A little bit about nomenclature in this area. You've heard the term VR for virtual reality, AR for augmented reality, MR for mixed reality. There's a tendency now to call it immersive reality, extended reality, as the combination of all these various ways of creating a immersive experience for healthcare. It's really surging pretty fast, and I think it'll be a key part of the next digital health wave for healthcare. The projections right now are that VR will be adopted by more than 30 million users within the next 3 years based on production lines and growing trends. Within 6 years, 70 million users will have access to a VR system. Again, empowered by the emergence of very powerful smartphone technology. And then, of course, blockchain technology and systems similar to that will be part of the emerging confluent technologies that will help us protect all this very sensitive personal health information. I think in the future, we'll start seeing the emergence of something else that will go along with this precision medicine of the digital twin paradigm, and that's the digital twin of your future self. We can create an avatar of your future self that can call you up on your cell phone and talk to you. And your future self, who will look like you, but 20 years older, 30 years older, can give you feedback about how the life story choices or adherence to healthcare programs is affecting your longevity and your future abilities and situation. And that's a very powerful motivating tool in a sense, closing the feedback. It's often very hard to see the consequences of our choices now, and having some sort of feedback loop is saying what we do today affects how we will be in the future, a week from now, a month from now, 5 years from now. A very powerful way to leverage the aggregated data that we're getting from the precision medicine model about ourselves. And I really think that this data analytic capacity that we're aggregating all this data will make a profound difference in terms of allowing us to customize clinical treatments for the individual. I'm excited by the work of some of the emerging startup companies that are focusing on leveraging precision medicine models to help address specific medical indications. One example is the company Octave Bio. They're working in the field of multiple sclerosis and coming up with ways to do a complete patient personalized management system to help deal with this very challenging and expensive disease by measuring what happens between office visits in a digital health manner. They're able to scan for flare-ups and problems and intervene before a problem becomes worse. This allows for a dynamic, longitudinal view of the patient's experience, collect information that allows us to modify clinical protocols and workflows. We can come up with structured decision support analytics. And this also drives population management and the business model behind managing a particular disease state. This is really important. Multiple sclerosis is just one example of the same paradigm that's being applied to other problems. By collecting data away from the clinic, we're able to come up with a specific pathway for the individual and a care manager. There can be key decision nodes and protocols at each specific point, identified again by collecting data outside of the clinic. This provides a context, integrates with patient preferences, their own risk file, and also their tolerability for different situations. I really think this concept of being able to come up with a data stream for clinicians to manage patients between visits is going to migrate to all sectors of medicine, especially empowered by the fact that we now have wearables, patient applications that can be on a cell phone or a computer tablet, and sensors that allow us to collect the data in a passive way so it's not too intrusive to the patient. This allows the clinician and the clinical system to manage the patient in a much more precise, much more effective manner. So let me just very quickly talk about the overall landscape that's part of this digital health revolution. It's really the full stack of healthcare that's being affected, from prevention and wellness to much more objective assessments instead of subjective measurements, much more functional training of our clinicians, improved interventions, ways to facilitate adherence, and ways to reach underserved populations. In terms of functional training, we can use simulations as a way to train people. They don't have to go to an expensive training program. They can learn on the spot and study up just before a complex procedure, renew their lessons. This allows us not just to learn specific clinical tools, but also interpersonal skills, how to use specific implemented tools, and how to practice as a team on how to deal with a clinical problem. We now have standardized patient simulators that allow us to practice how to interact with the patient. This is particularly important if we need to be prepared to deliver very bad news about a terminal illness, for example, to a family member. It's the sort of thing you don't want to have to learn on the job, and practicing with a simulated patient is a good way to build up that empathic skill. We can also train for very rarely seen emergencies, much like a pilot might use a flight simulator to practice for something that might happen very infrequently, but you need to be ready for. Same thing for clinical skill training. And moving on, we're now using digital health technology to do much more objective assessments of both cognitive and emotional status, but also physical movement, measuring activities of daily living. We can do much more robust assessments for all aspects of medicine by leveraging sensor technology and machine learning analytics to help us do that. And I'm excited about the next generation of cognitive assessments that are going to go beyond the standard paper and pencil test to come up with something that's more of a challenge, response. And I hope that someday we'll have a library of culturally diverse and age-appropriate scenarios that we can challenge people with to measure their response, instead of asking them, how are you feeling today, or how did you feel last week? Coming up with a whole library of new data-driven clinical interventions. In stroke and physical therapy, for example, we're using simulations to help people do the difficult, arduous process of rehabilitation. We're seeing platforms evolve that aren't just addressing one specific indication, but addressing a variety of often comorbid conditions. So anxiety and depression might go along with chronic pain. That might go along with the problem of managing stress and perhaps addictions. So coming up with a platform of similar applications with common user interface and analytics, instead of just one particular narrow application for one particular problem. Again, we're seeing things move into the health and wellness arena. I'll speak very, very briefly about why digital health applications are so profound in terms of promoting adherence and changing behavior. And that's because we can leverage through digital health the power of the brain's motivation systems, or reward systems. We shorten the feedback loop, we can show progress, and we can leverage the neuron systems in our brain that allow us to see the status of other people and use that as a way to help motivate ourselves to, for example, again, leveraging that paradigm of having a connection with our future self, seeing the consequences of our actions to help motivate us to stay on track. This way we can leverage the brain's reward systems and have a more profound effect on promoting adherence and compliance with the often procedure. The other thing that's great about digital health applications is that they promote agency and engagement by the individual. Instead of having participation in healthcare just be a passive process, we can have an active process where the patient understands what their situation is, look at their data, can close the feedback loop, participate, and we can put a layer of storytelling on top of this whole process. And instead of having it be a stack of Xerox papers that we give a patient to say, this is what you're supposed to do post-discharge. We can make it more, we can leverage against some of the findings and knowledge and skills that come from the entertainment and gaming industry, build that in by using digital healthcare apps to come up with better patient engagement, better patient adherence. So just very briefly, what are the constraints? What are the gating steps to adoption? Part of it is that we just haven't had a chance to do as much research as we'd like to in this arena. We have validation studies, but they've been on limited sizes of patients and limited number of clinical conditions. So we need to expand the work in showing the value of digital health applications and technology to larger sample sizes and to other clinical populations. We also need to do more research as to how digital health applications interdigitate with the healthcare system. We don't want to slow down a process. We don't want to have clinicians trying to figure out how to recharge a system or how best to merge it with it. So we need to understand the healthcare ecosystem a little bit better as we introduce new digital health technologies. So to summarize, and I'm sorry I've had to cover such a large amount of material in such a short amount of time, I hope I've been able to convey at least my enthusiasm for what is emerging right now. Digital health technologies have been based upon more than 3 decades worth of research and development. The recent changes have made them much more accessible and affordable. The pandemic has propelled us to take a closer look at how we can leverage digital health and telemedicine technologies. We're already using digital health technologies in all aspects of medicine, but it's mostly the early adopters and starting to be moved out now to other areas. I feel that the technology has great momentum, is poised to move into mainstream. I'm also excited, I mentioned earlier my concern about our aging population. What's nice about digital therapeutics is that they address a number of the problems that our aging population needs to address. Assessments, addressing isolation, loneliness, addressing chronic pain, addressing the depression, anxiety, functional rehabilitation, designing for disabilities, following patients post-discharge, and connecting people. So that's my very brief overview of some of the emerging digital health technology trends, and I stand by for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Walter, for these really valuable insights, really interesting. Please, Walter, stay with us for a brief Q&A time. And now I switch to Spanish again. Vamos a dar paso a la parte de preguntas que los asistentes nos estáis enviando, y para eso pues invitamos de nuevo a Aristides Senra para que pueda canalizarlo.
Thank you very much, Walter. Excellent presentation. I can say it's more than a conference, a masterclass that we received from the other side of the Atlantic. So thank you very much. So please just trying to answer a couple of questions that we've been receiving through our platforms. Just one of the first ones is related to one of the last things that you have already mentioned. How affordable will these technologies be? So it seems that the adoption curve will be different in comparing the most advanced countries with respect to the rest. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a very valid concern. I think what is interesting is now that the consumer electronics companies, Apple and Samsung and all the other major companies are moving into healthcare. I think the volume of manufacturing will drive the cost down. Also, I think as we start aggregating more data about how to best apply the technology, that will also help reduce it. If you look at the adoption of smartphone technology, of course, it started with people that were able to write a larger check to bring it. But that was mostly it was driven largely by the need for people to connect with other people, starting with, again, for people who could afford it for business purposes, for example. But now I think the technology has become much more ubiquitous. We can find smartphone technologies in all walks of life. I think digital health technology will float on top of that spread of access. I certainly don't want to minimize the concerns about not being able to reach underserved populations. However, we have a way to do it now in a cost-effective manner. So ideally, our healthcare network will move into that arena and help reach people that might otherwise not be able to afford it. And if the premise is that this technology will reduce costs, then we should be able to push it out and give it out to those who need it.
I have a question from Alberto from UPM. How do the numbers of future healthcare costs fit with the possibilities of public healthcare systems?
Well, I think the fact that we know just by doing the math that we're going to have acute needs driven by an aging population. If our government leaders can pay attention to that, we should be able to leverage the power of digital technology to help address that need preemptively. Now, I think it's always a concern that we won't rise to the occasion, but I think this current pandemic has helped us appreciate how connected everybody is and the importance of healthcare to reducing not just our own costs and our healthcare networks costs, but really our whole economy is tied up in healthcare. So hopefully our leaders will hear that. And with the other looming crisis that's coming, I think there's talk about the second pandemic, and people don't mean another virus, they mean the mental health pandemic that is coming because of stress and isolation and depression caused by the current pandemic. Hopefully we can rise to address that. And then again, there's also the issue of an aging population and the needs there. I think technology will provide new tools that will reduce costs. So if our leaders are wise, we will rise to the occasion and leverage the technology to proactively prevent the economic crisis that could come hand in hand if we don't.
Okay. Thank you. Manuel from the company Nuventos. What role will API technologies play in pushing integration of digital health innovation in the applications in hands of citizens and professionals?
Well, I think what is wonderful is that we're seeing a shift of the technology away from just in the hands of a limited number of people to now it's moving to more, the individual has access to their own information and be more active in their own healthcare. So I think the digital trend, in a way, it's an overused phrase, but I will use it. I think digital health technology is democratizing healthcare to a larger extent. It's empowering the individual to have information, to connect with other people that might have a similar condition, to share information as appropriate, and to again move the center of gravity away from one constrained spot, putting it out to a variety of other locations. And I think that will be, we have to be careful to protect the privacy of individuals and their information, and that's something of great concern. But I think it is, this emergence of digital health technology is going to empower the individual to be more active in their healthcare and be more proactive in staying healthy.
Mm-hmm. This is a question from Miguel Hernandez from the Pfizer medical unit. What structural changes in healthcare settings can support health workers in leading this digital revolution?
Well, health workers are really the people that are interacting with the patient, and they're probably the ones who are most acute of some of the, aware of some of the needs that are there. As a healthcare worker, if you are giving information to a patient, you often only have limited time to provide information to them, and maybe you hand them some papers to take home, which maybe aren't that clear. I think digital health technology can connect people in a way that provides more information post-discharge and follow-up. It also allows healthcare workers to stay in touch with patients between visits. and that can be very powerful. Now, we have to design things in such a way that it doesn't become a burden. Our healthcare workers are already overextended and overworked and exhausted. So we need to design digital health applications so that they save time, so they reduce hassle, so that they make the paperwork less arduous, and make everything more efficient. And that's, I think, one of the biggest barriers right now is we know that technology can improve healthcare for the patient. We have to make sure it improves the lives of the healthcare workers too, and doesn't add an extra burden on them, but makes their job easier by addressing some of the needs that they have to do better communication, better record keeping, better follow-up.
Okay. Javier from ESADE is asking how the digital technologies could help on monitoring the value journey and aligning multiple professionals.
Well, I think right now, one of the problems that we do have in the healthcare system is it's often very stratified, that, that there's people have a multiple of problems, but they might be seen with some clinicians who aren't connected necessarily with other clinicians, or connected with one clinic may not be connected with another clinic in terms of sharing information. One of the powers of digital health technology, if we do it right, is that we can share information, again, with controlled access and protecting patient privacy, but connecting different clinical care teams to look at the patient, different vantage points, seamlessly and ubiquitously, so that it's not as stratified as it is right now, and so that we can get second opinions or other approaches without having to go to a huge amount of effort.
Mm-hmm. Silvina Catuara, which are the digital health players that are making the most groundbreaking leaps forward in terms of neuroscience and mental health remote monitoring?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it's hard for me to point to any one group because there's so many groups that are making strides forward. There's groups coming from the pharmaceutical industry. There's groups coming from the medical device industry that are leveraging technology. There's also groups that are emerging from the academic arenas, starting early stage startups that are really jumping into this. I mentioned two companies in my presentation that, three companies that I'm very excited about. One is Penumbra. It's a medical device company doing neurotherapeutics that is coming up with a virtual reality platform for stroke, post-acute and post-acute stroke mitigation. There's other companies active in stroke too, using digital health technology. I'm excited that Hewlett Packard, as a tech company, has started to come up with biosensors built into some of their technology, can be part of the healthcare platform. I'm excited about Behavior. It's a digital health company that is looking at mental health and wellness and coming up in collaboration with a pharma company, Sanofi has teamed with Behavior to come up with new interventions for social anxiety disorder, for example. And some of the hospitals are embracing technology and helping to invest in moving it forward too, such as Hoag Hospital or Cedars-Sinai or Mayo Clinic. It's just, there's a lot of partnerships forming. I think the consumer electronic companies are playing an important role too by coming up with all the wearable sensor technology that collects their health status. So it's, and Octave, I mentioned Octave in my presentation. I'm really excited about what they're doing for multiple sclerosis as a digital health platform to do precision medicine.
Okay. So, Mr. Walter Greenleaf, we really appreciate your participation in this session. We've been very happy listening to your presentation, and now I have to say that I'm asking my colleagues back to turn their cameras on. Just a few numbers to say to all of you that we had more than 1,200 registrations and people from more than 25 countries, isn't it, Ivan?
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, Ivan, micro on, you're the organizer. Yeah?
Sorry, yes, that's it. I switched to Spanish now.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much, Walter, for such an interesting presentation. We are really grateful to you for that. Nos despedimos entonces, pedimos entonces a los organizadores y ponentes que puedan activar su cámara si lo desean. Muchas gracias a todos, ponentes, sobre todo asistentes, por su participación. Gracias a la Fundación Pfizer España por toda la cooperación y apoyo para desarrollar actividades de forma conjunta como esta. Thank you for your attendance. Let us be in touch. Stay well and safe. Gracias de nuevo a todos. Sigamos conectados y cuídense mucho. Hasta pronto. See you soon.
Iván, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias a todos.